Welcome, lovely sisters and brothers. Thank you so much for being with me today in this afternoon and beautiful day, I must say. And let us dive into patriarchy versus matriarchy. And it is in actuality the last that we need to live in, not the first one, especially not because this is really not the type of system that we should participate in. All right, patriarchy is the way of the so-called Father God. But we now know who God is. So patriarchy is the system of Marduk. And that is why we see destruction and a huge level of greed going on. Patriarchy is masculinity in its ultimate form, and it is an inversion and distortion of the feminine principle. The matriarchy is in actuality the ways of the mother. The archons with capital A changed it to the ways of the father, which is to the ways of Marduk. Because the God that so many Christians are worshipping is not whom they think it is. It is a full-blown psychopath known as Marduk. And from there, all inversion branched out in the Kinoma. Yaldabaoth is both the so-called, between quotation marks, kings of kings. Kanur in Syrian language. And also is he God. And it is the God of the New Testament is Marduk. The God of the Old Testament is Enki. And he is male and masculine. In the Pleroma, the aeons are the queens and source, the ultimate mother. And so is the goddess. Masculinity is not the same as male, which is a gender. It's all about an principle. Males and females only exist in the matrix and nowhere else in the entire Orion universe. All of the beings and species are feminine, and especially in the court, you have to represent yourselves as a feminine. The overlords tinkered with our DNA in such a way that they also have splitted us away from our originality. It is not, and it was never in the meaning of the divine creatrix to have a separate male and a separate female. Was never in the meaning. We are in our original blueprint androgynous. It was never mentioned to be a separate male and a separate female. Never. So masculinity is not the same as male, which is a gender. Males and females only exist in the matrix and nowhere else. Elsewhere, beings are androgynous. Star beings in Orion are androgynous, and the aeons in the Pleroma are also androgynous. And as we know, the Gnostic texts look at everything from a masculine lens, starting with the monad, source, being masculine from their perspective. Since Yaldabaoth is considered masculine and he is God in the kinoma, he looks at everything from that perspective because he does not understand spirit because he does not have a spirit and what is above him. So he emanated the 12 chief archons, and in actuality, from what I came to learn, is that the zodiac is also based on the 12 chief archons, who are also essentially androgynous, and some of them take on the female role, such as the Archontic Sophia, also known as Erishkigal. Still, even the so-called female archons act like males. Each archon has a counterpart similar to the aeons in Pleroma, who also have a counterpart as above, so below. So if the aeons have counterparts and the original aeons are feminine, are their emanations offspring then masculine? According to the archons, they are. The first human is masculine, Geradamas is masculine, and any other counterpart to the feminine aeons are according to them. However, that is a complete misnomer. An aeon is a creative emanation of source and therefore completely feminine. Aeons are androgynous since they do not need a male to emanate another part of themselves. It is not a sexual act, they imagine the emanation into being. Whereafter the emanation manifests and the aeon can give the emanation certain traits. There is no masculinity involved in this. In the Pleroma, this is not an outward action. It is not masculine, and neither are the offspring, who are also androgynous. In the Kinoma, the archontic process mirrors the aeonic process in the Pleroma. Here, the archons present themselves as inverted aeons in most cases. Patriarchy as a term became a solid thing after Yaldabaoth divided the androgynous human into males and females. At the end of the Second Atlantis, and the archons ruled over the human soul group thereafter. Patriarchy is always archontic. I repeat, patriarchy is always archontic. So now we get a deeper understanding of the total destruction that is going on in a rapid pace here in this world on earth, because we are seeing archontic leaders ruling us and this world and this what you could call real estate earth. And now you get the understanding, hopefully, why we see what we see. There are no exceptions, and it exists nowhere else, only in the kinoma. The kinoma is the mirror of the pleroma, and the kinoma is completely archontic, so everything is inverted and distorted because the archons lack spirit, they don't have this. So they copy everything, and they are even extremely bad copiers. They do not have that much intelligence either, because everything that they know about us is because they stole it from us. To the archons, the masculine outward energy movement is senior to the creative feminine inward movement. So hopefully you now also get the idea why also this hunt on women, and especially women with certain abilities, and why this witch movement was there, and why they found it necessary to burn witches at a stake. Why was that? Because most of these women were harmless in actuality, and they knew a lot about natural um, medicines. They knew herbs and herbals, and so yeah, that is a danger. And this is also one of the reasons why they are still promoting that we are using pharmakeia instead of nature. So there's a lot to this. And later on, I will also go into passing on the information about the suppression of women, and thus the feminine in actuality, the suppression of the feminine in this world. To them, men are the creative factor because they are the ones who are physically strong and can create massive things with their hands and their strength. Also, since they see Yaldabaoth as God, he who came first, self-emanated, he thinks, the archons consider the masculine on top of the feminine. So they do not acknowledge the feminine energy as creative over the masculine, but they see the feminine as subservient and the weaker side of humanity. Therefore, females representing the feminine energy, although both men and women innately have it, um, are more often than not under male domination. The archons made this possible by boosting the testosterone hormone in males. So they became more like the archons in a more dominant and aggressive manner. Archons profusely hate women because they represent what they do not have, and do not have and cannot understand, which is spirit and creative energy. Still, they need the creative energy for survival, and they let women use their creativity to serve, between quotation marks, superior men, who then usually take credit for it by building what the feminine came up with their minds and communicating. Some might say that matriarchy is exactly the same thing, i.e., if women are put in charge of things, they are just as dominant and cruel as a patriarchal man. So it's all about balance. This can be true sometimes, but that is not matriarchy. It's just women being patriarchal. As mentioned, we are not discussing genders, but energy and principles. The feminine force is not patriarchal. dominant, and competitive. These are all masculine traits. As mentioned, women can be just as patriarchal, dominant, or competitive as men, but then they are driven by their own testosterone and act like testosterone driven men. There is nothing wrong with testosterone, at least as long as we live in the kinoma, which is the only place in which it exists, because that is the sex drive both in women and men. And that is how we have procreated since the beginning of the matrix. But it also makes us prone to manipulation and aggressive behavior, such as going to war, fighting, killing, stealing, being abusive, bullying, and also other negative traits. So the patriarchy acknowledges women in power only if they, the patriarchs, can gain from it. Patriarchy is one-sided to the extreme. Humans are, as we know now, created androgynous, which means we have both feminine and masculine traits in us. As Namlu'u, we were made that way. Half spiritual, feminine, and half physical, masculine. So we could exist simultaneously in both realms to complete our mission. The archons, when creating Homo sapiens, exaggerated the physical/masculine to the maximum to suppress the feminine, particularly in males. Homo sapiens are in general extremely imbalanced, both as individuals and as a group. Many men suppresses the feminine side, which is also nurturing, to come across as strong and dominant, something that is encouraged by the so-called alpha males. It is nothing wrong with that either, but it can be very difficult for a male to balance his energies, and because of patriarchal societal norms, men can easily become abusive even without being narcissists. Many women also suppress their masculine side. We all need both in an equilibrium, so long as we are in the matrix. Not all men are patriarchal by any means. There are men who have learned to become more balanced, and although women have been trained to look for more dominant men who are very masculine, so to say, so they can protect the family if they have children. They often realize later in life that the balanced man who has his emotions under control and can act rationally and with empathy, love, compassion, and possessing nurturing traits is the better choice for safety and security. Such a male looks at the woman as an equal partner and human being, and not as something he can use for selfish purposes. For him, she has great value just by being herself. The most important thing when building a family is that the man who must take care of jobs and finances while the woman nurtures the child needs to have his ducks in a row, both financially and emotionally, and be able to also support the partner who will be very busy taking care of the baby's needs. He does not need to be dominant and abrasive. The latter easily leads to abuse and is not manly at all. Because most women, understandably so, discover later in life which type of man is best for them. Many young women choose dominant and somewhat aggressive and so-called charismatic males because they think such a man can protect them and the family. Sometimes they can because of their attitude, but very often it comes with a price, and that price is abuse. Whether whether the abuse is physical or emotional. After some time, the woman might realize she is actually not safe at all, and on occasion she divorces or leaves him, thinking she was just unlucky to find an abusive man. Later, she meets someone else, and without realizing she is doing so subconsciously, she chooses a very similar man because of trauma, upbringing, and what she has learned from society norms. It becomes a vicious cycle, and in the end, no one is safe and secure, only more traumatized. The point with all this is that we humans, women and men, must learn to become balanced. Men usually have more testosterone and are innately more aggressive. It doesn't help they are repressing their feminine side, looking at it as a weakness because they consider the female weak, and thus the feminine in general because they confuse feminine and masculine energy with gender. Nothing could be further from the truth. Subconsciously, the man seeks his balance in a woman, thinking that she will balance him, without he having to look inward to balance himself. The result is that he often uses the woman as a catalyst, and it becomes a selfish act where the woman is used for her benefit, feeling unseen and unheard. For the woman, this can be very draining. The more patriarchal the man is, the less he will understand the nature of a woman. Such a man becomes like an archon who uses the partner for sex and to serve him. Sometimes women act the same way with their partner if they themselves become patriarchal. Today, many women around the world are waking up from the patriarchal regime and refuse to be abused by, between quotation marks, dominant men who think they are for far more than women and use them as objects or for their own comfort without returning the so-called favor. Unfortunately, that movement was set in motion, of course, by the Allied, because each and every movement in this world is funded and created by the elite to create more division. Of course, they need to do so. And I discovered the more trauma they create, the more division they create, the more it keeps the frequency fence intact. This is something um, you need to ponder upon and to realize that you should stop participating in all this nonsense of the Allied, all their propaganda, all their psyops, and whatever they are spreading around. Um, because all that is also done not only to manipulate and to control us, but also to keep the grid and the frequency fence intact. So the more we start to master our emotional life, the better, the weaker the frequency fence also becomes. Because that thing is being kept alive, so to say, due to our emotions. And even worse, imbalance. So the Allied create more division and build an even worse imbalance, but that doesn't mean these women are wrong. Females who are now speaking out have also understood love bombing. Most of us have experienced it, especially in the beginning of a romantic relationship. We call it being madly in love or walking on clouds, but it has nothing to do with love at all. It is manipulation and it is toxic. Often, one person starts it to lure the other one in, and the other person feels heard and seen, and the hormones start working. But after walking on clouds for some time, the person who initially was the target of the love bombing suddenly wakes up and notices their partner is not at all the same individual as in the beginning. It is like a drug that wears off. Who is this person I live with? I have hardly anything in common with him or her. I would argue that the healthiest relationship is one that develops over time and without the accelerated love bombing phase where people put each other on pedestals. The latter is just hormones working overtime. So let us look to the patriarchal pyramid. Yeah. Many people may not know this, but if we look at the pyramid, we see the Star of David. Sometimes this is also how we quickly and symbolically draw a star we see in the night sky. The symbol itself comprises two enmeshed triangles or pyramid shapes, one pointing upward and the other downward. The upward triangle represents the masculine, between brackets the penis, and the downward the feminine, between brackets the vagina or the womb. Put together, this symbol represents androgyny, masculine and feminine in one. We have also learned that stars all originating in the pleroma are feminine and androgynous. The patriarchal triangle narrows as we reach its top, and that is where the alpha masculine sits, regardless of whether it is, for instance, a political power structure, a group of people, friends, or a romantic relationship. If we go to the bottom of the triangle, this one is much wider. In patriarchy, this represents the masses and the rest of a group, or the romantic partner in our previous example. So the bottom also represents the slaves, the obedient ones, whom are obedient to those in the top. So again, it doesn't matter if there is a woman on top and a man at the bottom or vice versa. It is still patriarchy. If a woman follows this power structure, she is a patriarch, not a matriarch. The one who is on top always uses the one or the ones below to gain more power at the expenses of others. So the power goes from the bottom to the top, and it's always a selfish act. And this level of selfishness is something we see in this world. To stay at the top, those in power need to create division at the bottom. such as transgenders against non-transgenders, nation against nation, wars and political conflicts, men against women, and lately women against men, etc. It is all part of the power structure. Divisions are distractions, so the rest do not realize that someone at the top is abusing and manipulate them to get what they want. And this is important that we need to understand. Um, sorry. So, therefore, I do not like competition since it creates division and feeds those at the top who abuse us, keep secrets, and gain from our ignorance. Those at the bottom, or at least below the top, strive to climb the ladder and to progress. They need to achieve it at the expenses of others. So they are copying exactly what the top is doing in the pyramid. Because they think, and that is the game that you see in politics, they are doing only their uttermost best to become part of the echelon of the patriarchal system. Because these politicians then think that they, can also gain the same powers. But of course, not everyone is allowed to become that powerful. Not least with money, which in the matrix is the essence of power. If we want to be competitive, why not compete with ourselves to improve, become better people, and learn more about ourselves by doing inner work, in other words. So let us dive into the matriarchy, the ways of the mother, the matriarchal pyramid. So the matriarchal system is the opposite of that of patriarchy. If we look at the inverted triangle, we have men and women on top representing the masses regardless of gender, where everybody is working in symbiosis, supporting each other to reach their potential and goals. As the triangle narrows toward the bottom, it represents those the larger group needs to assist so they all can come closer to the flat top of the down pointing triangle. These could be children and others who need help and nurturing, and it can also include other types of life such as animals and plants. In such a system, humans are truly the guardians of the living library. The living library is the spirit of nature, and therefore without, but it's also within, as the golden knowledge, the maternal library we keep inside us in the form of spirit. Thus, we can see that in the true matriarchal system, power is not the driving force, although everybody becomes more powerful because the entire community works as a group. The individual matriarch, man or woman, uses their power to create and assist others to become better creators. The common denominator among matriarchs is connection and open communication, not power. Connection results in individual and common power. The male and the female connecting in equilibrium create the ultimate power for both. In the matrix system, this leads closer to androgyny because not only do we connect with someone of the opposite gender treated as an equal, but it also greatly assists the development of an equilibrium inside each individual, male or female. This is extremely valuable because as soon as we enter Orion, we are in a matriarchal system. I would say it is impossible to achieve true matriarchy in this world except short term, sooner rather than later. The patriarchy would come in and destroy it. Many attempts to matriarchy have been made in the past, such as in ancient Egypt and in Lemuria. Both systems were destroyed by raiding patriarchal forces who took over these peaceful communities and societies. There are many more examples. However, we can all start our journey toward a matriarchal lifestyle now by working on combining the masculine and feminine within ourselves. We can go a long way doing this in solitude just by healing from patriarchal trauma. All intentional abuse is patriarchal without exception. And patriarchy is always evil because it is based on ignorance and stupidity. The more we heal as humans, the more matriarchal we become. Another excellent and better way to expand matriarchal potentials within us is to team up with someone whom we can communicate with freely and feel completely safe with, because we are all feminine and masculine in one. Despite genders, it is not crucial whether this connection is between two people of different genders or not. The advantage of having someone of the opposite sex might be that women are usually more feminine and men masculine. In homosexual relationships, one person is often more masculine than the other and vice versa. So that works the same. Therefore, when two people start healing from a life of trauma, which we all have experienced, and they can completely open and be open with each other on all levels, then magic happens and healing occurs exponentially. In the matrix, where humans produce children, a matriarchal community works in unity to produce a society the children want to inherit, which by definition leads to a much better world. It is a sharing system where things are not hoarded to benefit the few. The safety, security, happiness, and creative expansion of the community always comes first. If everybody could apply this, no one would go hungry and no one would be without shelter. The community would see to that because everything is shared and everybody supports everybody. There, each individual could develop what they are best at, according to their passions and needs. In a patriarchal society, inverted as it is, children are considered the property. And that's exactly how the majority of humans are indeed treating their children as property. And the governmental structure is also seeing children as property of the parents and of the state and of whatever institution. While in a matriarchal system, children are always treated as their own, with their unique needs and potential. The distinctive traits of each individual will be granted and supported. The parents and the community will support the child's ambitions and talents. A matriarchal system is based on love. empathy, equality, and compassion, while a patriarchal society is based on competition, jealousy, envy, selfishness, power, and greed. The world we have today and the world we have had so far for more than 123,500 years. I don't know. Ain't it about time that this comes to an end, all this shit? It is important to remember that nothing of this suggests that women should be our leaders instead of men. They can be as patriarchal as men. So again, unworth repeating, gender is not the contributing factor. To become more matriarchal, we, as a whole human soul group, must balance our femininity and masculinity within ourselves, regardless of gender. With all this in mind, what kind of society do we want to live in? There's no lack of patriarchy in the matrix. It was solidly built into its foundation. So we can continue living the way we do now, or we can strive toward matriarchy. Well, if the majority of humans decide to live on in the patriarchal system, we will see far more destruction than already is going on. However, true matriarchy can only be found in Orion and ultimately in the Pleroma. Whichever of the two paths we choose, we must face the consequences. We have lived in a patriarchy since the start of the matrix. Isn't it time for a change? Few people like what the world has come to, but there will be no positive change until we change ourselves from within. And so with this said, I also want to say that all those people who think that they need to go to protesting and whatsoever, please use your time useful by healing yourselves, by going within yourselves instead of wasting your time and feeding the suppressive system, which is an archontic system, because the archons, they love people going into protest and doing all sorts of things to feed them with their soul energy. So those people need to wake up and see that we need to change something in ourself, which is making a balance between the male and female energies in ourselves, principles in ourselves. All those people whom are complaining that they do not know what to do, these people need to wake the heck up and see that they indeed can do something by starting to see that they need to change something in themselves and that they need to balance out themselves, and so that male and female is in equilibrium within themselves. And with this said, I have come to the end of doing this live book reading. I wish you all a joyful, beautiful, and loving weekend these coming 2 days. Thank you for coming along, tuning in through Facebook, Rumble, and YouTube. And I see you after the weekend with a new topic, and I will see what my spirit finds of great importance that I need to pass on to you as information. And I also want to say I am just learning, as many of us are on this path. So I do not have all the answers. And that's why I'm saying go start communicating with your own spirit and ask the questions you have. Better said, the questions you have, send them to your spirit and ask your spirit for answers on your questions. We need to undo ourselves from constantly going to other people, and we need to train ourselves to use our spirit. And our spirit is the only one who knows. Another human cannot know all the answers. And I also say this because we also need to come more out of our brain. We are far too much trying to understand the things with our brain. Our brain cannot understand everything. The only one that can is our spirit. So again, thank you for tuning in, and I wish you all a beautiful, joyful rest of your day and a good, beautiful weekend. And I see you after the weekend with a new topic. And let us listen to a nice piece of music. Which is called Relaxing. All right, and it's created by Ben Sound. See you next time.